A very good sign that you've misunderstood the cause of a disorder is your inability to treat or prevent it.
You look at the data of ever-increasing obesity and diabetes, and you just think, how is it possible the whole world has failed to eat healthfully? Maybe we're being told the wrong advice.
Since the 1960s, the American Heart Association has been saying saturated fat is detrimental to cardiovascular health. You need to get it out of the diet.
It's hard to think of another policy that has caused so much harm, that has been so wrong.
You know the chief killer of Americans is cardiovascular disease.
I mean, the manipulation of the data and the idea and the push for low fat really got us in trouble.
I think the low-fat diet is genocide.
Saturated fat increases cardiovascular risk.
We've been told forever that fat's going to kill you.
This started because there's incontrovertible evidence that saturated fat is bad.
Over and over and over.
The more animal protein, particularly red meat, you eat, the more likely you are to get sick from all kinds of different things.
You're fat because you eat too much fat.
So low fat, low fat, low fat, low fat, low fat.
For 40 years, the Dietary Guidelines have set nutrition standards for every American, for our kids in school, for food programs for the poor and elderly, for rations for our nation's military, for doctors, nutritionists, and dietitians. We've had it hammered into our heads that fat is bad, especially saturated fat, the kind found in meat, dairy, and some tropical oils like coconut and palm.
Base of the pyramid, carbohydrates.
The food pyramid codified our fat phobia, telling us to make carbohydrates the foundation of our food choices.
I think the food pyramid is great if you're standing on your head, because you need to turn that pyramid upside down.
You can't be serious. That would put butter and fat at the top of the... Flip the damn food pyramid!
Nutrition is stabilizing.
We got the whole story wrong. We were told to eat 6 to 11 servings of bread, rice, cereal, and pasta a day by the government in the food pyramid. It should be called the food tombstone.
I'm Dr. Mark Hyman, a functional medicine physician with a focus on food as medicine. And I understand the healing power of food. But I can tell you, the low-fat diet did not make us healthy.
I think that a low-fat, heart-healthy diet is unproven. It was essentially a huge experiment on millions of people, and it failed miserably. Wait a minute, have you not seen? Are you not practicing medicine to see who's coming into your clinic? To see the problems that this idea has caused? I mean, it's just, to me, unbelievable.
For years, even I believed that eating fat would make me fat, and that eating saturated fat would cause heart disease and kill me. But now, a growing group of experts reveal that the science against saturated fat was never there.
I was astonished to find that there simply was no evidence.
It was just an idea, but it was launched as a policy for all Americans, based really on no evidence at all.
What is the evidence? A big, big zero.
Our federal dietary guidelines, the official government advice for how we should all eat to stay healthy, tell us to limit saturated fat to just a couple of bites a day and make carbohydrates more than half our daily calories. I'm here to tell you that advice is upside down and backwards. The idea that eating fat will make you fat is wrong, and the science that says saturated fat causes heart disease is misleading, and instead has led our nation down a dangerous path toward a widespread epidemic of obesity and type 2 diabetes.
We screwed up. Happens all the time in science. Medical orthodoxy latched on to the wrong explanation, made a tragic mistake, and now we're living with the consequences.
Dr. Zoe Harcombe is an obesity researcher who wrote her thesis on the lack of evidence behind the dietary guidelines.
My thesis was born out of trying to understand why we have an obesity epidemic.
Zoe collected all the raw data from randomized controlled clinical trials conducted prior to the release of the dietary guidelines. She then reanalyzed all the results in a process called a meta-analysis.
It was looking at the absolute totality of the evidence. No cherry picking whatsoever, no study left out. So there's the Rose Cornwall trial, there's the Research Committee low-fat diet, there's the MRC soybean study, there's the LA Veterans Dayton study, there's Leuren Oslo study.
When she examined the results to see which group suffered more deaths, there was no difference at all. There was no health benefit for the groups assigned to eat a low-fat diet.
I was astonished to find that there simply was no evidence.
Real food fats are not dangerous. They are not the enemy. It's too simplistic and reductionist to say saturated fat is dangerous and needs to be avoided, and the evidence does not support that.
In 1980, the U.S. government triggered a radical shift in the diet of Americans when the campaign against fat became official food policy.
The first dietary guidelines recommended 7 to 11 servings of bread, basically, every day. 50 to 55% of your calories are supposed to come from carbohydrates, mostly grains.
For the first time anywhere in the world, our government endorsed a massive increase in carbohydrates and slashed saturated fat consumption to less than 10% of daily calories.
The American guidelines started with a very high-carb, low-fat approach, which was disastrous for putting that out into an entire population without evidence saying that it was healthy.
Obesity in America had been slowly creeping up from the mid-1900s on, but in 1980 you see it turn sharply upwards.
And then it just takes off like an airplane. So you just want to ask, well, what happened around then?
What happened in 1980 is that the U.S. government told all Americans, cut back on fat and increase your carbohydrates.
It could be complete coincidence that just happened to coincide, but it sure as anything needs looking at to see if it is just coincidence.
When we took the fat out of the food, what did we do? We put something in which was way worse: sugar.
1, 2, and twist! Reduced fat Oreo. Less fat, loads of taste.
News reduced fat brownie, muffin, and cake mixes from Pillsbury. Try the new frosting, too.
Hershey's syrup is virtually fat-free.
Terrific.
I mean, let's face it, fat tastes good. We know that. And if you're gonna remove the fat from a food, you're gonna have to replace it with something else that gives people pleasure.
Because new Simple Pleasures is made with all natural Simpless instead of fat.
And what did they put in? Refined carbohydrates, increased sugar, and boom, we've got an explosion of processed foods.
So irresistible, people are sinking to a new low to get their hands on one.
Okay.
Continental yogurt is non-fat, not low-fat, non-fat.
Zero fat. How'd they do that?
Ultimately, sugar was a bigger problem than saturated fat ever was.
The industry learned that if they took fat out the diet, they had to replace it with sugar. They then learned that sugar was addictive.
Wow, these are really good.
These are great.
Bring them on. Oh, yeah.
And that's the driver of the Beast Epidemic.
Low-fat yogurt, higher in sugar.
Whoa.
Low-fat peanut butter.
This is special.
Low-fat salad dressing.
This is great.
All higher in sugar or carbs.
Are you sure this is fat-free?
All low-fat foods turned out to be higher in carbs.
I don't think this was anyone's intention, but it's what naturally happens when you remove fat, which is natural for humans to be eating, from their dietary choices, and you put them on things instead of tasting like cardboard, they can at least taste like sweet cardboard.
Snackwell's chocolate sandwich cookies. These taste unbelievable. What if I can't bake enough of them? Those women will be after me again.
Hello, Cookie Man. What's in the box?
The Snackwell phenomenon was like the epitome of what happened with the low-fat food industry, where people thought they could just eat massive amounts of these cookies.
Don't you think you got a little carried away?
They were very high in sugar and white flour.
Cookie Man, you better make some more.
The American Heart Association cashed in on the low-fat craze. Food companies paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to feature this heart-healthy checkoff symbol on a product.
So this resulted in crazy things like the heart checkoff on Cocoa Krispies or on Honey Nut Cheerios or on all these foods that were super high in sugar. But as long as they were low in fat, then it was considered healthy.
Kellogg's Fruit Loop cereal, part of this nutritious breakfast. Ha-ha, now that's a seal of approval.
Heart-healthy, low-fat Fruit Loops, anyone?
There's a kind of conventional explanation that it's really the fault of Americans for not following the guidelines. There's nothing wrong with our guidelines. It's just that Americans fail to follow them.
But government consumption data confirms Americans did as they were told and dutifully cut back on natural fats found in red meat, whole milk, eggs, animal fats, and butter. But we still gained weight.
One of the analogies that I like to use is, imagine you had a baseball team that lost every single game for the last 50, 60 years. And you're like, well, those players, they just don't know how to play. None of my players know how to play. Well, at some point you'd have to say, maybe we should take a look at our coaching strategy. It can't be the fault of all of those players for decades. But that's basically our explanation for why Americans are getting fatter and sicker. It's their fault. They just can't do it right.
I think the dietary guidelines have been a tremendous failed experiment. It's a good question of whether they just need to be changed or whether they just need to be scrapped and start over.
I genuinely believe that people now are hanging on to this saturated fat myth because they don't want to admit that they were wrong.
I don't think the governments will ever admit they were wrong about saturated fat.
And we are paying a hell of a price for a few public health people wanting to protect their own reputation, not wanting to look silly.
I used to fantasize about the American Heart Association press release that would say, okay, yes, we know for the past almost 60 years we've been giving you the wrong advice, and we apologized if we killed any of your loved ones prematurely, and we apologized if we gave you heart disease with the advice we did give you. We were just telling you what we thought was true then, and we were best of intention, and now we know better.
That apology may never come. And the largest health organizations dedicated to preventing obesity and type 2 diabetes continue to spread advice that makes it worse.
Yeah.
So how much weight have you lost total?
30 pounds.
That's great.
Yeah, and my goal was 50, so I think it's very doable.
And you're down another 5 pounds.
I am?
Yeah. Yeah.
In 2 months, Judy has lost weight and cut her insulin medications by 60%.
I think you have to look inside yourself and just determine that nobody's going to take care of you the way that you can. I don't feel like anyone could go wrong with making an attempt at this, but you can't attempt it for a week. You have to set your mind and set yourself to it for, a period of time.
Judy is inspired by thousands of other patients who've reversed their type 2 diabetes, getting off all medications with a high-fat, low-carb nutrition plan.
We reversed my severe type 2 diabetes after 1 month. I couldn't be prouder. No more insulin injection for me, and no more metformin or even statins.
I completely reversed my type 2 diabetes in just 3 months. Now, before I changed my diet, I weighed 212 pounds. Now I weigh 165 pounds and I take 0 medications.
Before I started, I weighed about 265 pounds. I now weigh 130 pounds. Now I can enjoy my family. I can do everything that you should do to live a life. It's just been a total change.
I have seen so many individual transformative patients. What an honor that is to share that journey with a patient.
I feel like if a person just is determined and sets their goals, that there isn't anything you can't do. You just have to decide that feeling good and being healthy is more important than the things you used to like to eat. It isn't very long before your tastes change and you really like it.